Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today is Martial Monday, in which we are going to be discussing the fighting style protection.
Walk, walk with hairbrush. I like protection. I think I might be the only person on planet Earth after reading some internet comments. I like protection a lot. I think it's pretty great. On some tables, maybe I overrated a little bit, but it's neat. It's really simple. I'm a huge fan.
All right, well, let us know what it does, and then we'll talk about things.
Sure. So when a creature you can see attacks a target other than you, that is within 5 feet of you. So when a creature you can see attacks a target other than you, that
Okay.
is within 5 feet of you. You can use a reaction to oppose disadvantage on the attack roll. You must be wielding a shield. That's
Sure.
That's all it does. So if something is attacked, you pose disadvantage. Easy peasy, right?
Right.
Ish.
Uh-oh.
There just aren't a lot of moments where you're actually like side by side people that are getting attacked. Fighter's job is often to be the one that takes the hits. Paladin's job is often the one to be the take the hits. So like taking a fighting style that only defends your allies whenever you're intending to take the bulk of the damage is a bit iffy. That's pretty good whenever it happens.
Now, just to be clear, what's the difference between this and interception we talked about last time?
So interception is whenever a creature other than you is hit, you reduce the damage by a d10 plus your proficiency bonus. So in the low tiers, interception tends to be a lot better because you mitigate known quantities, and the upper tier protection tends to be better because you can mitigate far more damage by removing the attack's ability to hit versus reducing incoming damage.
But they're both dependent on you being next to somebody else who is the target of the damage.
Yes.
All
and
right.
that's
Is that the bulk of why people are down? And you mentioned protection specifically. We talked about interception before. Are, is the consensus the same on that one?
from my understanding, the consensus is that they're not particularly good. So I think yes, they are not powerful at empowering specifically your character's ability to be good on their own. I think they are excellent whenever you're in the right team environment. Whenever you have the right party composition, they have a lot of potential power. The problem is that's just not most party compositions. Most D&D groups are 4 to 5 people. In those 4 to 5 people, 1 to 2 are going to be in the front line. And if you are ever separated, this just doesn't have text. And this not having text whenever you're not side by side with your monk, this not having text when you're not side by side with your other paladin or your barbarian or whoever else, that's a pretty big problem, especially as maps get more complex, especially as you're asked to be in different places, you're asked to cover different regions, do different jobs in a battle map. Protection gets worse and worse and worse. There's often going to be times where you're looking at a complex battle map where you have to hold down or block one entryway, right? You're going to be tasked with just doing that. That's just the fighter's job, is to hold this zone. Other players aren't going to be necessarily 5 feet next to you, and this just stops being a fighting style then. That's kind of an issue. However,
well, and you might be the target of the damage.
Yeah, more often than not, also, whenever you're engaged on 5 feet, you are being a priority there. Sometimes it's good for you. Sometimes protection lends things to attack you instead of your neighbor, which is better for you oftentimes. Because you're like, okay, my rogue can keep doing the damage. They know I have protection because I did it once. So then prioritizing me is kind of like protection is this passive taunt, which is honestly, I think, a better way to handle taunts than the compelled duel style, where it's no, you will attack me or you have disadvantage on attack rolls. I think I prefer it being this intrinsic strategic taunt, where it's like,
yeah, I'm happy with both of those things coexisting.
That's fair. I think that it is going to do a little bit of secretive work behind the scenes where the DM goes, well, I know he has protection, I might as well just attack him. And that's kind of can be upside. It can also be downside whenever you've got a barbarian next to you that's raging and just not using their resistances, and you're just getting your ass clapped as other things. They're just wailing on you with mauls and warhammers and arrows, and you're like, yeah, but just punch the just gesturing vaguely at the barbarian with your open shield, praying that he gets hit instead of you, right? Like, that's going to be, sometimes that can occur. It leads to ultimately, I think, there being some clunky moments with protection. I think there's going to be ultimately tables where, even in the best case scenarios, it's going to struggle to find a perfect home. In its perfect home, a reaction to those disadvantage attack rolls is really great, and just having that at will is very good. I personally am a big fan of this. I put protection on melee martial defensive characters that I'm making with fighter classes. I find myself not using it that frequently, maybe 2 or 3 times a campaign, and that's where
Oh
ultimately it
my.
ends. Well, I don't play as I DM everything. I'm never getting to play
right.
very long, so normally those are 1-shots or 3 to 4 levels tops. So like that's not a particularly big statement as far as the utility of it goes across the board. But for the battle maps that I run, for the battle maps I see run, for situations that I see, you need to have a really heavy dedicated martial party where everyone wants to get up in the thick of things for you to think regularly use out of protection.
Or
If
a
you're in that
strategy.
situation, it's great.
Yeah, or a strategy you specifically build around this. Maybe you and your paladin friend both have protection, and you go
That's
in as
cute.
fighting buddies. I think
I like that a lot.
I brought this up with interception last week, but it still applies that whoever gets attacked is the attacker's getting disadvantage.
And the moment you are
I shield
separated, you
you
both lose
shield
your
me.
fighting style.
Yeah, that's true.
So like big downsides too. I think that kind of upside is really cool though. And again, we talk about it a lot. Building your team composition more than just building your individual character is, I think, something that a lot of people sleep on. And I think that in the session zeros, talking not just about what you want your character to be and their fantasy, but talking about what kind of team they're in, talking about what kind of game you're looking to play, I think will help features like this really shine brightly. Will help features that are sometimes a little bit overshadowed because they're dependent on party composition heavily. I think they can help them come to light. If you have a paladin buddy and you do the protection back-to-back fighter paladin front, that could be really, really cool in a band of noble knights doing quests for holy relics. It could also be really fun in a band of brigands that are running across the countryside and doing breaking and entering, and you got the thief rogue on your side, you got the vengeance paladin or the oathbreaker paladin next to you, and you're like the scrappy, charismatic bard-like fighter. Maybe you took a level dip in bard and you got the protection thing going on. I think those getting specific looks and feels of your teams will help protection come to the front, is to be like, this is something that we're all engaged in and wanting to do, and that's where it's going to become quite good all over the place.
Or, I mean, like you were saying before, maybe you build your own character, heavily armored, bulked up with hit points. You use this, or you fail to use this specifically to protect, somebody squishier next to you. Like, you are inviting the attacks on yourself. If the enemy knows, oh, he's just going to protect that wizard, then they might attack you instead, and that's why you're using this. The wizard gets to keep his concentration stuff going, and that's technically the feat isn't or the fighting style isn't used, but it is.
There are conceptually, yes. Conceptually, I think there are going to be times where that occurs, where you are drawing fire because they know you have protection. And in that instance, I think it's pretty good. The reality of it, though, I find is that there's so many times in combat where just arbitrarily people get separated, where the wizard's like,
Yeah.
I don't like being in this position because I have the ability to be attacked. I'm going to retreat before that's an option. And then you're like, but my turn's after the monsters, and then they engage you, and you don't really have that window to use your protection fighting style anymore, right? There's going to be a lot of instances on battle maps where things aren't perfectly set up, where you don't have the ability to go in and be like, this is specifically where everyone's going to be, where I can always leverage this. It's going to be a little bit more scrappy. It's going to be a little bit less strategic. It's going to be not less strategic, but less, you have less agency going into a lot of fights as players. So it's going to lead to a lot of moments where you're not going to be able to position exactly where you want. Fight protection is not always going to be able to even do its threaten thing. So it's going to leave it as, again, unless you can always know you've got multiple allies, one of them's going to be within running range that you can go over to and start shield defending and attacking whenever they're fighting. You're going to be in a little bit of a pickle. I think the most reliable one's probably a rogue. I think having a rogue because they want to be engaged with another allied melee or melee ally. If you have a stabby stab rogue that really wants to use daggers, protection fighting style is going to make a really great dynamic duo between whoever's got protection and the rogue. And I think that you can have a cute dynamic too, where it's like maybe the paladin sees good in the rogue, and the rogue is just like, I can't believe this scrub thinks the world's such a good and happy lucky place. You get a really cute character dynamic there, but those characters also just play well together, right? The paladin protects the rogue does more damage for doing that. You get this cute little trade-off where they're both swinging big hits, and it's cute. Buddy cop style, right? That's just going to require that coordination and prep ahead of time, where things like protecting the wizard, things like protecting the clerics. Cleric maybe also you can help protect their concentration spells kind of in the front line. But a lot of battle maps, you're going to quickly figure out things get separated. People are going to quickly no longer be in fireball formation. You'll also get punished for being neck to neck in things like fireball formation, right? Like the fire breaths of dragons, big AoE spells. There are reasons that you don't want to be side by side with other people. It makes the whole of this clunkier and complicated. And I think I like complicated features. I like features that ask you to consider a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just going to be, in practice, a lot of tables can't get mileage out of this. And that's, I think, the case of the protection.
I was also thinking, and I haven't really fleshed out this thought, but we talk occasionally about spells that are concentration spells that ask you to get into the thick of it. And I'm usually down on those, but is there anything applicable with that here?
Like I said, clerics like being in the front line. You could have paladins that also like being in the front line. We just touched on a spell that you cast to do bonus damage to the concentration, and it does bonus damage on a hit. Having a fighter buddy in that paladin, each one of you has protection fighting style. Both of you getting hit less means concentration staying up more. That's pretty decent, right? It is one attack roll, so like they can just continue wailing on it past the first one. Disadvantage doesn't mean auto miss. Disadvantage just means roll twice, take the lower. So it's not guaranteeing that they're going to miss or anything.
Yeah.
But it is a meaningful layer of protection that you're adding on top of it to try and maintain concentration on longer durations effects. That's pretty fine. Clerics in particular, I think, are the, like rogues, they're the more likely to be the melee concentration kind of characters. They're the ones that are more likely going to be in the thick of it. Warlocks to some degree as well, if you're doing like hexblade stuff. You can have concentrating allies to your right. You got a protection shield up, and you got a rogue to your left. And someone's going to get attacked to try and deal with the more threatening allies to your left or right, and you can kind of mitigate that. And that's, I think, pretty good use case. That seems pretty reasonable to me. I would highly recommend like building your team so you got a frontline cleric, a frontline fighter, a frontline paladin, a frontline rogue. That group probably plays really cohesively. They probably have a lot of easy overlap where everyone's triggering each other's abilities. Bless goes on the squad. Clerics love area effect things. Paladins get auras of devotion and stuff like that so they can bolster up all their buddies around them. You can probably build a pretty cool like hit squad where everyone wants to be within 5 feet of each other. You're going around doing missions together. You powered by the tight-knit community. That is almost like the requirement for protection to be readily usable is the real issue that the feature ends up having. Because if you aren't in those environments, if you aren't in situations where you are heavily rewarded for being back-to-back with allies, people spread out very fast. The rogue wants to be shooting the longbow from as far away as they possibly can get. The cleric doesn't necessarily want to be in melee range. He's going to be like 30 feet back, and they'll be like, you got a healing from a distance and a guiding bolt here and there. Maybe I'm a death domain and I'm twinning some spells, but they're not necessarily directly next to you, and they don't want to be because it's dangerous.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got a rating for this one?
I think it's a 2. I put it over defense every single time. I will always and forever take protection over defense on a character with a shield because it's cool. And because there will be a couple moments where you turn a miss into a hit and it's going to feel cool as hell. The problem is it's just not that consistent and it's going to be wildly dependent table to table. If you get the table where this can come together, I think this is one of the better fighting styles. It's just not a lot of those tables exist.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to give it not going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 3. But yeah, you don't take this without a plan to use it. Yeah, that's but when you do have a plan, when you have when you build around it, when you have a strategy, you talk to the rest of your team. I don't know. I think it's gonna come into play a lot more than you give it credit for.
I think if you have the dedicated team to make this good, it's one of the better fighting styles. It's probably a 4. Yeah. That just doesn't readily happen. I don't think you should expect it to. I think at the vast majority of tables, what is where I try to aim my reviews, this is a 2. You'll get a handful of uses out of it, but that's about it.
I made a vow to be more optimistic, and this gets a 3 from me.
Fair enough.
All right. That was protection. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Let us know what you think about protection down in the comments. We will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.